Thanks for joining us today. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Lee Ji-yoon in Seoul. Coming up on today's edition of Business Daily. Things are not looking so bright in the country's job market as the pace of employment growth slows in June. Companies in tech and banking sectors are all expected to post improved earnings in the second quarter. These stories and more coming right up. After returning from the G20 summit in Germany, Korea's finance chief has set out the direction of the government's economic policies. In his third economic roundtable with ministers, he said future policies should support Korea's exports in the global market. Our Kim Hae-sung reports.
As the new government works on its economic policies, it will aim to support Korean trade against various internal and external risks. That's the message from Finance Minister Kim Dong-yeon, who sat down with other government ministers after returning from the G20 summit in Hamburg. The finance minister said that during the summit, world leaders reaffirmed their support for free trade against the recent rise of trade protectionism, one of the biggest risk factors for Korean businesses, along with a hike in U.S. interest rates and the adjustment of monetary policies in general.
The government should preemptively develop various methods and scenarios to manage internal and external risks and at the same time use them as opportunities.
The finance minister said that the government's economic policies expected to be announced within the month should focus on supporting Korean businesses and exports in the global trading environment, which he noted has improved as of late. Kim also added that President Moon Jae-in's meetings with other leaders during the summit provided the chance to strengthen Korea's economic partnerships with key regional neighbors, namely Japan, China, and Russia, as well as deepening cooperation with India and Vietnam in terms of trade, investment, and exchange of human resources. Reflecting on these developments, Korea's government ministers agreed to work together organically as a unit to address various external challenges. They also agreed to build up an intra-governmental framework to manage the possible renegotiation of Korea's free trade deal with the U.S. And in terms of dealing with China's economic retaliation against the THAAD missile system in Korea, the minister stressed the need to strengthen communication and exchange with officials in Beijing across various related ministries. Kim Hae-sung, Business Daily.
It appears the appetite for new household loans could be waning. According to the Financial Services Commission, 7.8 trillion won worth of fresh loans were taken out in June, the rough equivalent of $6.8 billion, down 3.8 trillion won compared to a year earlier. Borrowing from non-bank financial institutions, so-called savings banks that charge higher interest rates, saw the biggest decline, plummeting 3.5 trillion won. The growth in new loans for the first half of this year fell by more than 10 trillion won compared to a year ago. There was no slowdown observed in mortgage-backed loans, however, which rose by more than 6 trillion won for the second month in a row. Earlier today, the government released Korea's employment figures for June, an important barometer of whether the local economy is on a solid recovery path. Unfortunately, the numbers didn't paint a rosy picture in that regard. Our Kim Ji-yeon has more.
Job figures for the month of June are gloomy, to say the least. The number of people in Korea's workforce was up 301,000 in June compared to the same month last year, the lowest on-year climb in 5 months. Statistics Korea says the number of people employed rose in general in June, except for those in their early 20s, with the employment rate at 61.4%, while the unemployment rate for June stood at 3.8%. The youth unemployment rate of 10.5% for June was the highest recorded for the month since 1999. The real unemployment rate felt by 15 to 29-year-olds has risen to a record high in June at over 23%, up nearly 2 percentage points from the same period last year. The statistics agency attributed this to the shrinking number of jobs young people prefer, particularly in sectors related to science and technology. By sector, the number of people employed in food and lodging decreased for the first time since December 2011, inching down by 1.7% on year in June to below the levels recorded in 2015 when the country suffered from the MERS outbreak. Luckily, employment in the manufacturing sector has risen for the first time in a year by 0.4% in June, largely due to a rise in exports, and because of a base effect as figures were unusually low due to a recession last year. Meanwhile, the number of people not included in the workforce due to childcare or education decreased by 24,000 in June from the previous year, while the number of people giving up employment rose by 29,000 on year to 449,000. The number of self-employed has also risen by more than 41,000, continuing its 11-month increase. Kim Ji-yeon, Business Daily.
Last year, an average of 2,500 businesses have called it quits each day due to the slowing economy. Even as tens of thousands of self-employed business owners were closing up shop, the sum of transferred wealth among the rich reached an all-time high. Our Oh Jung-hee has a snapshot.
2016 was a rough year for small business owners, fending off a toxic elixir of intensified competition against a backdrop of a drought in consumer spending. Data from the National Tech Service shows 1.23 million new businesses opened their doors last year, even as 910,000 were forced to close their doors, an on-year rise of 3% and 15% respectively. That's an average of 2,500 business shuttering every day of 2016. Zoning in on owner-operators alone, compared to the 1.1 million individuals opening up new ventures, 840,000 were abandoning their dreams, a 13.5% rise from the year before. The surge of new players in the market, the highest since 2002, is being attributed to last year's far-reaching corporate restructuring. It led to the early retirement of many in the baby boomer generation. And compared to their fast re-engagement, the economy had not recovered sharply. On the other hand, transferred wealth among the affluent in the country had reached an all-time high last year. Inherited wealth closed in on $12.8 billion, whereas gifted wealth hit $15.8 billion, both up by double digits year on year. Meanwhile, corporations were not left out in the hard times. Their closure rate jumped by 37.5% on year, hitting the second highest level since 2004, approaching 70,000 companies. Oh Jung-hee, Business Daily.
Now, moving on to markets. To give us a brief picture of this week's stock market action, we have our Lee Joo-young joining us on the phone today. Hello, Joo-young.
Good afternoon.
All right, so how are things looking in today's session?
Korea stocks traded nearly flat throughout the day on Wednesday after yesterday's record-breaking gain. At the closing bell, the benchmark Kospi fell about 0.18% to close at 2391.77, while the tech-heavy Kosdaq also fell 0.75% to close at 651.1. On the foreign exchange counter, the Korean won strengthened against the greenback at 1,145.1 won.
Now, it seems like investors are taking a breather, taking profits after record highs seen in the Kospi yesterday.
Right. With the Kospi closing at record high in yesterday's session, it seems like many investors were eager to cash out on recent gains. At the opening bell, retail and foreign investors started off as net buyers in the main bourse, while institutions unloaded shares. Samsung Electronics, the largest listing on the Kospi by market cap, gained 1.8% to close at 2.49 million won. However, other large-cap heavyweights in the market put in a lackluster performance aside from Hyundai Motor. By sector, shipping, semiconductors, semiconductor equipment, and cosmetics performed strongly, while real estate, internet software, and services were sluggish.
And Fed Chair Janet Yellen is scheduled to speak before congressional committees on Wednesday and Thursday. How do you see this moving the markets?
A more hawkish Yellen is expected to emphasize that the Fed could raise rates again this year and begin shrinking its balance sheet before the end of the year. This comes on the back of a strong jobs recovery, with June employment reports showing roughly 220,000 jobs created. The markets have detected a more hawkish tone from Yellen in recent weeks, but any changes in its current course to tighten monetary policy could unsettle markets and investors who have positioned themselves in anticipation of further rate hikes and tapering of the Fed's stimulus. This has been Lee Ju-young for Business Daily.
The second quarter corporate earnings season has shifted into high gear here in Korea, with speculation in the air over just how much the country's largest corporations have earned in Q2. To tell us more about this, we have our Oh Soo-young joining us in the studio today. Hello, Soo-young.
Hi, June.
All right, so I hear Korea's tech firms are set to put up some impressive figures in the second quarter.
That's right. Korea's #1 tech giant Samsung Electronics has kicked off the earnings season with a bang. The company released its earnings guidance last week, which estimated a record $12.1 billion in operating profit, the biggest in its 48-year history.
The company's flagship smartphone, the Galaxy S8, sold steadily, though not as well as expected. Skyrocketing sales of memory chips are what drove up the company's profit, accounting for more than $6 billion, thanks to a huge surge in global demand as well as rising unit prices.
In fact, it's almost certain that the company's chip sales have surpassed Intel's in the second quarter, becoming the world's biggest semiconductor manufacturer in the process. Korea's #2 chip maker, SK hynix, is also set to record its largest ever profit in the midst of a memory chip supercycle characterized by high demand and limited supply in the market. Also, growing demand for OLED and LCD panels are likely to have benefited battery makers and panel producers like Samsung SDI, Samsung Electromechanics, and LG Display. New flagship smartphones like Samsung's Galaxy S8 and LG's G6, as well as the upcoming release of Apple's iPhone 8, which all require core panel and battery components, may also have boosted their margins.
These manufacturers are expected to record huge gains at a rate comparable to that in 2009, backed by a new spurt of growth in flexible OLED and dual cameras. The growth momentum is expected to last into the medium and long term, especially with the development of electronic cars like Tesla 3, which require state-of-the-art batteries and components.
Then which other sectors are anticipating bigger profits for the second quarter?
Well, market watchers say the banking sector will also see some hefty profits. Higher interest rates for loans have boosted their net interest margins, a crucial measure of profitability. The shipbuilding industry could also see some vast improvements. After struggling to make ends meet last year, Korea's big three shipyards have reclaimed their top spot in the global market in new orders for vessels and offshore plants. Another sector that's likely to see a substantial boost in earnings is durable consumer goods, on the back of strong seasonal demand for household appliances.
We expect LG Electronics to post steady growth in household appliances and televisions, accounting for about 9% and 7% respectively of its total operating profit. LG has set new global trends with its dryers and styler products and released premium televisions, strengthening its margin and solidifying its brand image.
Now, on the flip side, I imagine there are some companies that have not been so fortunate in the second quarter.
Yes, quite a few local companies are in for a disappointing earnings season due to various external factors. A steady fall in global oil prices, down roughly 10% since the beginning of this year, is expected to take a heavy toll on the country's energy firms like Lotte Chemical and SK Chemicals. The automobile industry is also likely to see narrowing margins. Major automakers like Hyundai Motor and Kia Motors have seen a steady drop in sales in their biggest overseas markets, the United States and China.
Both their operating profits and pre-tax profits are expected to shrink. Fewer sales in the U.S. as well as an increase in operating costs may have narrowed the pre-tax margin by 30%. After sales hit their peak in 2015 and 2016, demand has been falling consistently, and the downward trend is likely to continue until next year. Meanwhile, in China, Beijing's economic retaliation against the THAAD anti-missile system in Korea, a lack of Hyundai and Kia SUV models in the market, as well as weaker brand positioning, are likely to have put a damper on sales.
Auto parts supplies will also mirror the car makers' declining fortunes. Hyundai Mobis, for one, is expected to see its operating profit tumble by roughly 20% on year. Experts say other sectors likely to see less than expected earnings are retail, cosmetics and leisure, largely due to the loss of Chinese customers.
Korea's largest beauty and cosmetics company, Amore Pacific, is expected to see a 40% plunge in operating profit compared to a year earlier, and duty-free stores are likely to see sales cut nearly half, according to various analysts.
Now, could this be a drag on the overall performance of Kospi-listed shares?
Most analysts don't think so. In fact, they expect the IT sector boom to continue throughout the year and drive up the local bourse to new record highs. In the first quarter, Kospi-listed companies saw combined sales and operating profit grow by roughly 8% and 40% respectively.
The second quarter will likely represent a historic high in terms of profit, gaining 19 to 20% on-year. On-year growth of 40 to 50% is likely to be seen in the third and fourth quarter as well, according to the current market consensus.
Experts say that there's a high chance companies that haven't done so well in the second quarter will see their margins grow in the remaining half of the year, with new product releases and improvements in global demand conditions, a slight recovery in oil prices, for instance. The total operating profit for Kospi-listed companies are expected to hit a record high of $169 billion this year.
Global appetite for corporate stocks are growing compared to bonds, and expectations of strong corporate earnings, particularly among chip makers, along with an anticipated rise in stock prices, are expected to attract more foreign capital.
Well, hopefully things will turn around for some of the struggling firms for the remaining of this year. Thank you so much for coming in today.
My pleasure.
More than 9 gigawatts of new nuclear capacity came online globally last year, the largest annual increase in a quarter of a century. According to the World Nuclear Performance Report, 7 new reactors were added last year. With 448 nuclear reactors around the world, total nuclear capacity topped 350 gigawatts for the first time. The number of reactors being built remains high, with 61 under construction at the end of 2016, mainly in China. Franchise owners here in Korea have been feeling the impact of various scandals that have rocked their company's upper management. Now, despite this, we're seeing corporate headquarters and individual franchisees becoming more united when it comes to profit sharing and other support measures. Our Elliot Kim tells us more.
Here, product developers are taking the time to explain the advantages of these sofas and beds. You can see it, touch it, involve all of the senses. The franchise headquarters isn't taking unilateral action when introducing new products. These products can only be released with the approval of 80% of the shareholders.
I've been doing this for 10 years, and I pick out what the consumers want every time I attend these product evaluation sessions. The head office is good at reflecting that.
There's a fried chicken franchise that has dispatched corporate employees to 5 franchise branches every month to help them operate and work on improvements. They do everything from cleaning the restaurants to organizing tasting events.
Seeing is believing, and it's easy to operate the store because the head of office listens to our issues and solves them.
This bakery chain's corporate headquarters shares profits with individual franchisees. They share advice on business operations and recipes. And franchise owners feel the royalty fees and supply costs are fair.
In large franchises, profits mostly go to corporate headquarters. By being more cooperative, we can develop products together and share profits.
As franchise headquarters try to shed their negative public image, people have noticed their efforts to hold themselves to a higher ethical standard. It's a departure from their overbearing presence and malpractices seen in the past. Instead, cooperating with the franchise owners to prosper in unity. Elliot Kim, Business Daily.
It's not unusual to see Seoul's Itaewon district filled with foreign tourists and expats, with restaurants there offering various dishes from all around the world. So we're going to look at how these restaurants have attracted people from different backgrounds with their global cuisine.
This neighborhood, crowded with people of diverse nationalities and filled with an exotic charm, is Seoul's Itaewon. With such a gathering of multiple nationalities, the food is likewise diverse. This is a restaurant located on the World Food Street. Crowds of visitors include foreigners looking for a taste of home and Korean diners looking for something exotic.
I wanted to eat something different since it's Friday night. I looked up the Michelin Guide online and I found this place. I wanted to try Thai food.
The royal Thai dishes at reasonable prices have garnered the restaurant Michelin Bib Gourmand recognition.
It's been 3.5 years. It's different in style from domestic Thai restaurants. It's a place to express old, classic Thai dishes in a modern way and present them to Korean diners.
The food here is prepared according to recipes obtained in Thailand by the chief, who trained at the Thai Royal Food Academy. In addition to well-known dishes like pad thai, rice noodles, and tom yum goong, there are also less familiar dishes not available elsewhere, like somtam and muop saparod. What's the most popular dish here? It's pad pong curry, an exotic dish made by hand-grinding various spices.
Compared to famous chain restaurants in Korea, there's less of the unique stimulation that's tailored to Korean taste. That's my impression.
Thanks to the nod from the Michelin Guide and positive word of mouth, the number of customers here has been growing.
20% of our customers are foreigners and 80% are Korean. Foreign diners include not only Thai people, but French, American, and Southeast Asian people too.
This restaurant, where mounds of meat are served on foil with mouth-watering rice and salads, specializes in Middle Eastern food.
I have a Muslim friend who recommended this place. I came because I thought new dishes would be tasty.
A quarter of the global population is Muslim. The religion does not allow foods such as pork, animal blood, or alcohol. Only a strictly halal diet is permitted. This restaurant addresses the concerns of Muslim diners in Korea.
It's a halal restaurant. All the ingredients are halal certified, meaning they were butchered and processed according to Islamic law.
Using only halal certified ingredients, this restaurant is a favorite not only among Muslim diners, but vegetarians as well.
I really like it. I've been in some restaurants here, but I think this is my favorite. It's not to make an advertisement, just no, but real, for real, it's nicer than others.
Reasonable prices are one of the best parts of the Itaewon Global Food neighborhood. The owner-chef of this restaurant was trained at the renowned 120-year-old Le Cordon Bleu in France. It's a popular spot because high-end steaks can be enjoyed at butcher shop prices.
Delicious food can be easily enjoyed. We reduced our profit margin so diners can have 2 or 3 dishes instead of just 1. Befitting the Itaewon location, I wanted to offer food I experienced in Italy, France, Spain, and the US.
As I experienced with Spanish pincho bars, going too far ahead leads to public rejection and failure. It's important to read the timing and go with the flow. We are therefore simulating various aspects here.
In addition to the fresh ingredients, unique sauces like celery puree, chimichurri, yuzu saffron, and barbecue sauce are another draw.
I had the shrimp stew, which was spicy and delicious. It's right in the middle of tasting familiar and feeling exotic.
It was just things like shrimp, but it felt new. The meat was cost-effective for domestic beef. It was all good.
Food from 37 nations is offered here, spanning Europe, Asia, the Americas, Oceania, and Africa. Dishes offered at reasonable prices can be had at approximately 300 restaurants. Itaewon's global flavor map is continuing to expand.
And that wraps it up for today. Thanks for watching. I'll be back tomorrow with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.